Hey guys, Sam here at NA Studios. Today I want to take a look at Neutron 4. Now, I've kind of relatively recently got my hands on this, and there's always been that AI mechanism within it where it can essentially mix your track for you. It can essentially say, right, what does your track sound like and how can we make it sound better? Because it kind of knows what a kick drum should sound like. It knows what a vocal should sound like, etc. So what I've done here is I've got a mix that was recorded a few years ago. You'll probably have heard it if you follow the channel. This is a track called Change You. This is a rock track. And I've got Neutron 4 on every single channel. And I've gone through and said, right, mix that. I've not even told it anything. I've done basically what I say to the missus. Whatever you think is fine. I've just said, right, process that. I've not told it that's a kick drum. I've not told it that's a vocal or anything. Literally just gone, that is some audio. Make it sound better. And this is the result. I want to see how it makes it sound, how it improves it, if there's anything that's kind of detrimental to the sound, and then we'll dig in a little bit and see what it's done. Cool, let's go. So you can see here then I've got my mix and I've got Neutron 4 on everything. So just go to the bass, for example. I've already run this. I've already gone, okay, let's play this section of some audio and here's what it sounds like. Do your thing. And it thinks about it for a little bit and then it says, hey presto, here's some audio that sounds better. So for a bass, for example, it knows that it's a bass. It's got its kind of vague curve there. Got some controls down the bottom, but really you want to go into here and you can see everything that it's done. So it's done a little bit of sculptor, which is its kind of tone shaping magic. And then the EQ, it's done some pretty wild bass EQ there. That'll be interesting. It's compressed it again, and then it's put an exciter on it. Let's talk. Let's just listen to it. Let's do a before and after. What it sounded like when it's completely dry and what it sounds like now. Now, I will say all I've done on this is levels. I've not done the iZotope visual mixer or anything because I haven't, whatever. I've just done the levels and I've leveled them when it was dry and then I've kept the exact same levels when it's wet, as it were. Let's listen.
Always on my mind, a feeling that I need to find. At least that's what people tell me anyway.
That's pretty cool. What do I say about that? All right, so first of all, the original sounds like super dull compared to the mixed version, the iZotope mixed version. But also if you flip those two statements round, the iZotope one sounds really bright and kind of a little bit aggressive in comparison, which I guess is part of it. If you listen to something that's really dull then something really bright, then the one that's really bright sounds too bright, and then you go back to the dull one and it sounds too dull. So to me, if I were just listening to the iZotope mix on its own, I would probably say, that sounds good, that sounds punchy, that sounds bright. But listening to it compared to the super dull, not processed version, it makes it sound a little bit too aggressive. But I think in general, wow, that sounds awesome. Let's dig into it a bit more. Remember, there's no effects on this at all. Neutron doesn't really have any kind of effects that you can put on, any reverbs, delays, or anything like that. So in terms of that, it's completely dry. There's no automation, no anything. Literally just pressed go on all the channels. I've done some buses as well, so let's dig in and let's see exactly what it's doing. So on this track then we've got a kick mic, kick trigger, snare mic, snare trigger, and then all the stuff that you'd expect to see. Loads and loads of guitar tracks, all that kind of stuff. Let's take a listen to the drums first then. Let's solo the drum bus and see exactly what it's doing. So just on the drum bus then, let's see what it's doing. Let's take it off and put it on again and just have a little listen. So this is with Neutron on. Okay, so you'll notice that some of the bands aren't doing a whole lot all of the time. That's because it's just kind of picking out certain sections and saying, right, maybe when there's a floor tom, then it's an issue there, but it's not an issue for the rest of the track, so you won't always see all the bands moving all the time. But that's cool. That's kind of fattened it all up and brightened it, but just squashed it in general a bit as well. Just one more listen. It feels like the compression is doing more than it says it's doing. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe the exciter is kind of adding to that little bit of squash, that little bit of crunch. But that's really cool. I like that a lot. Let's take a look at just, I don't know, let's go for a snare. Now, I remember this snare track had quite a lot of spill on it, so it'd be interesting to see how that's dealing with it. Yeah, loads of spill. Okay, that's interesting. It's not gating it and it's not expanding it, so it's not actually dealing with that kind of thing, which is interesting because I suppose that it's not... Gates are a weird thing. I don't like gates in general. I think they're a bit annoying. And they're a very like human controlled thing, aren't they? That in my experience, gates are never just set and forget. You always have to kind of manipulate them a little bit, so I try and find other ways around it. So I guess the reason it's not gating or expanding it is it's kind of just getting rid of that lack of human element and saying, well, I'm not sure that we can actually do that reliably every time, so let's just find other ways around it. So that's cool. Let's take a listen to it before and after then. So here it is before any of the processing. That's a ringy old snare drum. Let's take a listen to the sample that I've got going on there as well. That's really brightened it up, and in comparison it does sound kind of dull without any of that processing on. That's cool. Let's move away from the drums though. Let's go on to the bass, because we kind of spoke about that, didn't we, and said that it had some weird EQ. I'm assuming it probably sounds quite good because it sounds good in the track. This, I'd never do that to a bass. Let's see what's doing it. Okay. Just soloing that band. Okay, that's just adding like some aggression to it, just adding a little bit of bite. That's cool. It's not actually doing anything to the bottom end though. That's really interesting because to me it sounds like it needs a bit of bottom end to it. Or rather it did when I was listening to it before, but now it kind of doesn't feel like it does. Maybe it's compressing it so it's kind of bringing up that bottom end. Not particularly. Interesting. Okay, so on Sculptor, it's bringing up some of the real lows and then taking out some of the kind of low mids. And on the Exciter, it's kind of doing a similar thing, I feel. When you take it off, it's just shaping it a little bit, so it's adding some of the real lows and taking out some of those low mids. So instead of actually adding a load of bottom end, it's just cleaning up the higher bass frequencies that are actually already there. That's cool. I like that. I'm really interested in taking a listen to these guitars because to me it sounds like they've just been completely cleaned up. They sound brighter, but they kind of sound like the squelch and the mulch has been taken out of them. Let's take a listen to them in solo and then in the track and see exactly what Neutron has done to them. So this is just my guitar bus. I've got it soloed. Let's just take a listen and see how it sounds with and without the plugin. Okay, so when that plugin comes off, it just turns into this big box of squelch, basically, which that's interesting because it's kind of brightening everything up, but then taming all that low end at the same time. So let's just dig into it and see exactly what it's doing. So if I bring this back on, let's just take a look at the plugins, exactly what it is they're doing as we run through. So a fair amount of top end being added there. I think this one, Sculptor, this is doing the lion's share of it, I think, because you can see it's taking out loads of this low mids and adding a load of this brightness. If I just bypass this one plugin, yeah, that's doing a lot of the sound, isn't it? What's the EQ doing? A bit of taming again. So it's actually just, it really does know what it should sound like, because we can hear that it's got too much in the low mids when the plugin's not on, and it's just getting rid of that completely. I'm really impressed with that. Around here especially. Yeah, so it seems like it's the sculptor and the EQ that are doing the lion's share of the work. I wasn't really expecting the compressor to do much because it's distorted guitar, you know, it's not really that dynamic an instrument. But one interesting thing we can do here, if we go back to the kind of macro control view where we can change the overall punch, the overall, you know, distortion and width, we've got this tone match control here. And I think this one is just going to be the overall tops and bottoms. I'm just going to try bringing this down and just see exactly what it does, because I think if I bring this down, this is going to be not as bright and it's going to take us back to kind of the original sound, or we can go over the top and go really bright. Let's take a listen. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, we can get super bright there. Okay, so on a bus level, that's really just sorting everything out completely. And I've got it on all the individual tracks as it is as well. So if we just take a look at just the first guitar and just see what it's doing, I'd imagine it's doing something kind of relatively simple. So let's just take, oh, okay, maybe not. Let's take a listen to just that one soloed. So this is just the first guitar. Okay. Okay, so it's actually doing relatively little on a kind of channel basis, but then that bus control is really doing absolutely loads of the heavy lifting. I should say that I actually processed all the individual tracks first and then did the Neutron on the bus level, so it's kind of been quite tame on the ones first off, and then it said, right, once I actually get all these guitars together, there's a build up. So that's quite cool, because sometimes on a track level it's hard to hear that build up, it's hard to hear that low mid squelch that's kind of developing, but then when you listen to it all together it becomes really apparent. And that to me says that Neutron is hearing stuff in the way that we're hearing stuff, or at least that I'm hearing stuff. When you hear one guitar on its own, it's not as noticeable, but then when you get the full bus together, that's when it becomes an issue, and that's when it needs to be tamed, and that's exactly where Neutron is taming it. That's cool. Wow. Okay, let's take a listen just quickly to the full mix without that Neutron on the bus level, and then with it on, and just see how much life and bite that is really bringing to the mix. Yeah, quite a considerable amount. That's really adding so much bite, so much aggression in that high mid, which is exactly what this track needs. That's impressive. I like that a lot. But let's take a listen to the all-important vocal. To me, it sounds like it's a touch bright at the moment. It sounds like it's maybe a bit on the kind of distorted side of things. But let's jump in and see exactly what Neutron has told me it wants it to sound like. Now, one thing I have found about this in the past when I've used it is that unless you've trimmed up your vocals, unless you've really kind of taken out all the bits in between, the breaths and stuff like that, using something like obviously RX, it's not massively kind on that, because it can't really differentiate between them. I guess one day maybe they'll put an RX module in Nectar or something. That'll be awesome if they did. But for now, you kind of have to do... It's annoying because you have to record stuff properly, which is weird, isn't it? You should record stuff properly, obviously, but if you're recording in home setups, etc., then maybe there's little gaps in the middle where they're like breathing or taking a drink or whatever. So you kind of have to trim those bits up. So as a matter of course, I tend to do that on every vocal now anyway. So yeah, just something to watch out for, because often the processing can, in those little gaps, be kind of detrimental. But I guess that's true for every kind of processing. If you've got something really compressed and then you've got someone taking a big glug of drink, any kind of compressor, iZotope or otherwise, it's going to sound like a really big glug of drink, compressed loads. So just record stuff right in the first place. That'll be my advice. Now, again, I've got this vocal going to a bus down here, so we're going to have to bypass both of them really to take a listen to how it sounded originally. Let's just do that, and then I'll play it with both of the waves of processing on, the channel and the bus.
It's always on my mind, the feeling that I need to find. At least that's what people tell me anyway. It's always on my mind, the feeling that I need to find. At least that's what people tell me anyway.
Okay, it sounds a lot kind of crispier. I feel like it's brighter, but not necessarily in the way that I personally would have chosen. So let's dig into it a little bit and see what choices Neutron has made. So first of all, let's take a look at the channel level and just see what that's doing. Let's just bypass the channel level stuff and see how that's affecting it.
It's always on my mind, the feeling that I need to find.
Okay. Yeah. All right then. What about the actual bus stuff? How's that affecting it?
It's always on my mind, the feeling that I need to find.
Okay, so with this one again, I did the channel level stuff and then went into the bus. I don't feel like it needs both of them. I feel like it needs just one of them and maybe a little bit of a tickling on the other. So what I'm actually going to do is leave the channel stuff alone, and then just on the just on this one, the one that's now here, I'm just going to take this one down. So the tone match, this is like a how exact do you want it to be matched to the curve that we have in our sort of database, as it were. So if I bring this tone match down, I'm essentially going to be using less of this. Now, one thing you can do with Neutron, which I'm not actually going to do, but I'm going to tell you about it, is you can make it listen to a reference track. So you can say, right, this vocal is something that I want it to sound like, and you can kind of match that as well. I haven't tried that because I think that's delving a bit too deep into it for the purposes of this video. That's really tailoring stuff, and for this I'm trying to tailor it as little as possible. I'm trying to just see what Neutron wants it to sound like, and to me this vocal sounds a bit too bright, a bit too processed. So one change I'm going to make is this tone match. I'm just going to bring this down a touch on the channel level and keep the bus level the same. So I'm essentially just saying, okay, don't process it quite as much as that. It sounds a little too distorted, a little too harmonically exciting, and I don't particularly want that in this track. So let's hear it and let's bring down this tone match.
It's always on my mind, the feeling that I need to find. At least that's what people tell me.
Okay, let's hear how that sounds when it's in the track as well. Now, you can hear a little bit of glitching that went on there. That's my computer. That's not actually Neutron making it sound weird like that. Neutron's quite a heavy plugin, like it's quite processor intensive, at least for my computer. So it's going to have to think about it a few times when you're using that on-off switch. The better bypass button that you really have here is over on this one here. That's kind of a cleaner bypass, but it's not actually visible when you're in this menu. So just bear that in mind. So let's take a listen to it now with that first wave of processing off and just the bus level stuff engaged.
It's always on my mind, the feeling that I need to find. At least that's what people tell me anyway.
Okay, cool. It sounds better tonally, but I think that the level is actually a little bit wrong. I guess when I did the first sort of balance, then I didn't quite get that right. So I'm actually just going to bring that up a touch and just listen to it and just get it to the right point.
It's always on my mind, the feeling that I need to find. At least that's what people tell me anyway.
Okay, cool. So now we've got that engaged. Let's go for a bypass of the bus level stuff, because this is where it's actually, you know, making the most difference, because I've just taken that tone match down on the channel level, and just see exactly what it's doing. So before it first.
It's always on my mind, the feeling that I need to find. At least that's what people tell me
Okay, yeah, it's got that nice sort of shimmer over the top. To me, vocals are always the most difficult thing to process, the most difficult thing to get right, especially if you're just doing it like you're just telling a plugin to do it for you. That to me is always going to be the bit that you kind of need to knuckle into a little bit more. But the thing to remember here is that the way I'm using Neutron here is not really the way that you're supposed to use it. You're not really supposed to just put it on all of them and then click export and say, excellent, the mix is done. It's not about that, just in the same way as Master Assistant on Ozone isn't about just clicking master this track for me and sending it off. It's about getting you kind of 80% of the way there, 90% of the way there, and then you can tweak it from there. So I guess what I'm doing here is, can Neutron get us 80% of a mix? Can Neutron get us 85, 90% of the mix? And the answer is an absolute definite yes. It sounds so much better than it did in the dry version. It sounds brighter, there's far more definition, there's a bit more weight, it's tighter in the low end. I think if we were to then go that extra few percent and add some effects, some reverbs and delays, and then an extra few percent again and do the master processing, we would have a pretty fantastic sounding track here. And I don't think it's about that click and go on Neutron and that should be finished. And you shouldn't think that just because you've clicked go on Neutron and it doesn't sound exactly the way you want it to, that Neutron has somehow failed you. It's not about that at all. At least it's not to me. It's about getting you to that starting point, and then you can kind of take it from there and just tweak stuff. And what it's done here on the drums, guitars, especially the bass, it did some stuff I wasn't actually expecting, but definitely improved the track, that kind of mid-range boost. The vocals I'm going to go back to and just tailor a little bit, but I don't feel like it's going to be massive changes. I'm not going to get rid of this instance of Neutron and start again from scratch. If I were to be mixing this further, I would just be going in and just making a few subtle changes. And I think that is exactly what Neutron should get you to, and I think that's exactly where it does get you to. Alright, thanks so much for watching. If you've got anything to say about this mix, anything to say about Neutron 4 in general, please leave it down in the comments and I'll endeavour to reply to you. I think it's great. I think it does a great job at getting you such an enormous head start on your mix. And even if you were just to run this to start off with and then mix from there, then it's worth its weight in gold, and I think it's a success. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you again soon. Take care.